Greetings, Ian from RTO here. Welcome to another Wednesday marathon, the day we tackle those big discographies. And today we've got another viewer's request, and I think it came off of when we did Tube My Army. And it is, of course, Gary Numan and his solo career. So, Gary had two big hits with Tube My Army, and then he went solo. But what he did, he maintained the band to record to start with, which is pretty cool. He's gone through different phases of music, but it's always been synthesizer based. He dabbled with dance, and which I'm not too keen on. There's sort of two periods of Gary's career I like: the beginning and the most current, because he's sort of gone full circle. But there's always at least one track or two tracks on each album that are pretty good. So I did do some research, and apparently this year sold over 10 million records, and he has got a big cult following, which is fantastic. And as a solo artist, he has released 19 albums. So it's been pretty consistent. So we'll have a look at these 19. Big one today. So we're going to get straight on with it. So coming in at number 19, we've got the 11th album that was released in 1992. And this is called Machine and Soul. Now Gary does the vocals and keyboard and a bit of guitar. We've got Kipper on guitars, Mike Smith on keyboards, Keith Bass on guitars, Aid Orange keyboards, Susie Webb doing some backing vocals, along with Jackie Raw and Kathy Ogden. First track on here is called Machine and Soul. Now this is quite a strange track. It's funky with some synths in it. The drum programming is a little bit off kilter. I've never been really into that track, unfortunately. Then the next track is Generator. This song's not very good. This album seems to be a man with a lost soul. He doesn't know what he wants to do. The Skin Game is very much like Generator. Just a few little dabs here and there of different sounds. Poison, this is very disjointed. It just nothing for me. He seems like this is like a debut album where you don't know what direction to go in, and I think Gary was trying to go all over the place and it didn't work. I wonder, now this is one of the better tracks on here. This is more that Gary Numan synthesizer sound that you know. It's probably the best one on the album. Then we get Emotion. Now this is a very atmospheric track. I don't mind this. It's very ambient. It's got that distinctive synth Numan sound. Cry. This is atmospheric as well. He's very good at these ambient atmospheric tracks. That's pretty good as well. You Got the Look. This is a cover of a Prince song, of course, and it isn't a bad song, and he does a pretty decent version of it. Love Isolation is the last track. A good track. I love the guitar riffing at the beginning. It's really good, and it's got a really good solo. Again, one of the better tracks on this album. Okay, this is a little bit of a confusing album for me. It's a bit of dance that just didn't work. Then he did the back end of the album is more traditional Gary Numan, and some of them tracks are pretty good. But I'm only going to give this one an RTO ranking of 3 out of 10 because it's so disjointed. It seems like an artist who's got lost within the music business. Okay, then coming in at number 18, we go to the 7th album now. Now this is released in 1985 and it's called The Fury. Gary Numan, of course, background and lead vocals and keyboards. The Wave Team PGI Wave programming. Mike Smith's on the keyboards, Ian Heron guitar, Andy Coghlan bass, Martin Anderson bass, Tessa Niles, who turns up regularly as a backing singer. She's sung with Mike Oldfield. Tracy Ackerman's on backing. Dick Morrissey on saxophone, he turns up a lot. Ian Ritchie. And the first track on this one is Call Out the Dogs. This is pretty good. This is that distinctive synthy sound that you get with Gary. I like that track. The Disease. Now, I love saxophone, but it's so irritating in this song. It's too high pitch, and you must concentrate on that noise from the sax instead of the rest of the track. Your Fascination, a bit of change of direction. This is where he sort of started to have different ideas, and it's going more disco-y, dancey sort of thing, and it just doesn't work for me, that one. Miracles. This goes back to some of the really early late 70s sound. Great track, I do like that one. The Pleasure Skin, that's 80s drum programming that Gary got down to a T. Works on that one as well. Creatures, it's not too bad, it's listenable. Tricks, not keen on this one. It's all over the place, very disjointed. It seems like it's 3 songs put together to make one. Then we get my favourite track on this one. It's called God Only Knows, and I've always liked this one. It reminds me of some other stuff off the Tubeway Army albums. Really strong track. Great vocal from Gary on that one. And the last track, I Still Remember. It's okay, sounds a little bit like Ultravox. There's nothing wrong with that, and a nice bit of sax. Yeah, there's some good tracks on this one, but there's also some of that mid-80s production that's crept into this. Even in the electronic business, 80s production is there. But there's still a lot of stuff that you recognise as Gary, but I should give that one an RTO ranking of 4 out of 10. Okay then, coming in at number 17. Got the 8th album now. This is from 1986 and it's called A Strange Charm. So joining Gary here are Bill Sharp and Mike Smith and Ade Orange on guitars and keyboards. Russell Bell is on the guitar and backing vocals. We've got Mark Railton guitar, Martin Elliott on the bass, Chris Payne's playing the violin, Dick Morrissey's back on the saxophone, Ian Heron's drum machine programming, Roger Odell does some programming as well, Jess Liddard, Tessa Niles, Linda Taylor all doing the backing vocals, and Jess does a bit of percussion as well. My Breathing's the first track on this. I like this. This is what I call the technical side of Gary Newman. He's got that unusual vocal, but it's the arrangement and some really nice backing vocals here from, I think, from Tessa and Linda. Pretty good track. Unknown and Hostile, the only thing I really like that. I hate the drum machine, but the saxophone and the guitar riffs do give it a little bit of focus and distracts you from the bad drum programming. The Sleep Room, good track this is. I like the arrangement. Even the drum fills sound a lot better on here. And then Nothing from New London Town. The cheesy 80s sound has really crept in. Why did Gary have to go that way? I don't know. He'd got a unique sound, but no, he wanted the 80s. And there's even that 80s synth sound on it. Not very good. I Can't Stop. This is another track that I'm not keen on. For the same reason, it's got too much of that influenced 80s synthesizer sound. Strange Charm. It's listenable. It's got some nice guitar effects on it though. The Need. Now this is a little bit too long. It sort of halfway through goes off into some weirdness, and then he does drag it back in, but that middle bit needs to be chopped. This Is Love. What's great about this is the saxophone solo from Dick Morrissey is fantastic, and it's a good way to end the album. It's not a bad album. They always find something, even in his experimental adaptation. There's always something he's drawn back to, that original sound. And I'm going to give this one an RTO ranking of 5 out of 10. Okay, then coming in at number 16, we get to the 9th album now. This was released in 1988, and it is called Metal Rhythm. Lots of people on here, but Dick Morrissey is back on the saxophone. Tessa Niles is there, Martin Elliott, Andy Coghlan and Mike Smith and Ian Heron, and then there's loads of other people. This is Motion. Yeah, this is something straight back out of the early catalogue of Gary's. Very good. Hunger. This has got a real catchy tune. I don't mind it. New Anger. This is a great track, my favourite one on this album. I love the guitar riffs. That's one thing with Gary, you get synthesizers and guitars, and they work. Even though it's got that sort of plastic drum beat, as I call it, I think the guitars do add that richness, and that's why I like that track. Devious. I hate these electronic bongo sounds, they sound terrible. I like proper bongos. The guitars riffs are good. America, very catchy tune from Gary. Great vocal. I love his style of singing. Then we get Voix or Voisk. I don't know how to pronounce that one. Not too bad. The effects are okay. Respect, more of this plastic drum beat. Everyone was using it in this period. It's very Stock Aitken and Waterman, which I couldn't stand. Young Heart, probably the weakest track on the album. It's all over the place, disjointed. Then we get Cold Metal Rhythm, not very memorable. Don't Call My Name ends the album, and I don't mind this one, pretty decent. Again, it's a little bit all over the shop. There's some good stuff and there's some not so good stuff. So I'm going to give this one an RTO ranking of 5.5. Okay then, coming in at number 15. We've got the 10th album released in 1991 and it is called Outland. Joining Gary on here is Keith B. Bays on guitar, Mike Smith on drums and keyboards and guitars, Dick Morrissey's on the sax, also got Tim Whitehead on the sax, Russell Bell on guitar, Nick Beggs on bass from Kajagoogoo, Paul Harvey on rhythm guitar and slide. Now the first track is a little sort of intro thing called Interval 1, very ambient synthesizer and bass, really good. Soul Protection. Okay, this is a little bit poppy, but it's got a nice beat to it, even though with the cheesy hollow drum machine, it does sound okay. Confession. Very hollow drum sounding. It certainly needs a little bit more boom on them drums, but the guitars are pretty good. Now, My World Storm. The percussion though it seems it's all done on machines, it sounds like that it's a drummer missing beats in places. Dream Killer, love this track. This is going back to the Tubeway Army and early solo stuff. Great track. It's got that distinctive synthesizer sound from Gary. Dark Sunday, probably the sort of percussion in this is weird. Backing vocals, don't like this one. Outland, this is quite different, but it's in a good way. It's quirky. It's got a nice sort of rhythm to it. Heart, very old school Gary Newman, so I love that track. Then we get a thing called Interval 2, which is 19 seconds long, and it's just loads of sound effects. From Russia Infected. This is a track, does he want to stay with electronic music or go into dance music? It's neither one or t'other, as they say. Interval 3 is 39 seconds of noises, and then we get Devotion. It's okay. It's got a nice ambient feel to it. Whisper. Again, it's got that distinctive Gary Numan feel to it. I think this is the part of his career, though he's trying to keep with his origins but stay relevant, and some of it doesn't work. But the tracks that do work on here are fantastic. I like some of these tracks. So I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 5.6. Sip of coffee, I'm afraid, folks. That's better. Right, coming in at number 14 then. It's the 14th album from the year 2000, and it is called Pure. On here we've got Richard Beasley on drums, Steve Harris, not Iron Maiden Steve Harris, of course. Guitar, Rob Holiday on guitar and keyboards, Monty drums, keyboards and programming. Pure, it's the opening track, good track. It's got this very industrial sound. I like industrial drums, you know, some of the stuff on Rammstein and some of Jean-Michel Jarre's. I love that sound, it's a good track. Walking with Shadows is very ambient. It's got some nice, delicate touches on this. I like that track a lot. Rip. The textures of sound on this are good. I like that. Vocals a little bit out there, but it sort of doesn't matter because it's got some ambience. One Perfect Life, again, the ambience on this. This is where Gary was starting to go back to what he was made him famous. It's really good track. My Jesus, one of my favourite tracks off this album. This has certainly got lots of them early day sounds, but using the modern day technology. Then we get Fallen, nice gentle piano on this, it's really nice. Then you get that industrial sort of bass line, it's quite clever. Listen to My Voice, my favourite track on this album. Again, it's that industrial sound and the metallic sound, I like that a lot. A Prayer for the Unborn. Again, Gary's gone back to ambience and atmospheric tracks. It's a great vocal from Gary, I love this track. Torn, again, ambient, great vocal from Gary. Then Little Inventro, this could have come straight out of 1979. It's a good track. I Can't Breathe, another industrial sort of synth track, don't mind this one at all. First album of the new century, and Gary's starting to turn it all around. We've got lots of elements of classic Gary Numan here. That industrial sound is really good on this, and I like listening to this album. So I'm going to give this one an RTO ranking of 6 out of 10. Okay, then coming in at number 13, we go to the fifth album from 1983, and it's Warriors. Joining Gary here, we've got Joe Hubbard on the bass and Cedric Sharpley on drums and percussion, Bill Nelson guitars and keyboards, Russell Bells on guitars, Chris Payne on keyboards and viola, John Webb keyboards, Dick Morrissey's there on his saxophone. We've got Tracy Ackerman on the backing vocals and Terry Martin keyboards on the Tick-Tock Man. Side 1 opens up with one of my favourite tracks by Gary Numan, Warriors. I love the keyboards in this. It's that distinctive Gary Numan sort of synthy whine. Wonderful stuff. I Am Render. First of the tracks that start creeping in, where he's sort of thinking of changing his direction a little bit. It's not too bad. The Iceman Comes. I like this. The vocal on this. 1 minute is singing strong, and then he goes into this ambient sort of voice. His range is really good. I do like that track. The Prison Moon. This song is very dated now. It does sound very 1983. That is one of the tracks that just hasn't carried over the years. My Centauri, not a particular favourite of mine. It's just a little bit disjointed and changing direction. Sister Surprise, another quirky little track. It's 8 minutes long, but it's got lots of little quirks in it. It's not too bad. The TikTok Man. This is very interesting. It's got that vocal whine that Gary's good at, but in tune. It's a strange track, but it really works. Love Is Like Clock Law. I love the bass on this, and the saxophone from Dick Morrissey is fantastic. The Rhythm of the Even, bit like Funky Town Line. It's got some of that, but it's got a nice sax to it as well. On the whole, this is a very good album. Few changes in direction, but it's still very old school Gary Numan, so I'm going to give that an RTO ranking of 6.3. Okay, then coming in at number 12, we got the third album from 1981, Dance. So you've got Gary Numan on lots of different sort of synthesizers, including quite a lot of Roland and Yamahas, guitar and bass, piano, claves and hand claps. Paul Gardner's on the bass, Cedric Sharpley's drumming, Chris Payne on the viola, John Webb doing hand claps, Jess Lynard on drums, Mick Karn, fretless bass and sax, Nash the Slash on violin, Roger Taylor, and I don't know which Roger Taylor it is. Is it Roger Taylor from Queen or Roger Taylor from Duran Duran? Not quite sure. It's Rob Dean guitar and lots of other sort of session musicians. So we got the first track, Slow Car to China. It's too long. It's 9 minutes long. It's about 5 minutes too long. It sort of fizzles out like a candle burning away, just fizzles away. Night Talk, one of the crossover tracks. It's starting to change sound, going a bit more funky, but it's the fusion of the two sounds, and it sort of works. A Subway Called You. I don't like this track. I remember when I first heard it, I thought, oh, are we changing direction? Cry the Clock Said. Another track that I'm not very keen on. She's Got Claws. Love this. Great track from Gary. One of his classic tracks. Bit like Crash. Always been a favourite of mine. I love this. It's just got them great elements of proper Gary Numan sound. Boys Like Me. Not too bad. I love the bass line on that. Pretty drives it along. Stories, very old school Gary Numan here. The original drum, the original drum machine that he had, that high pitched synth, good track. My Brother's Time, again a great bass line, and the electric piano on here is pretty good. You know, traditional electric piano. You Are. This reminds me of the song We Are Glass, but it's pretty good. Then we get Moral, sorry. Really good guitar work on this. Quite like that. I'd say this is that first album of where he was starting to experiment in other genres, but there's plenty of good old-fashioned Gary Numan on here, so I should give this one an RTO ranking of 6.5. Okay, then coming in at number 11, we go to the sixth album, Berserker. So joining Gary now are Chris Payne on the viola and keyboard, Cedric Sharpley's on the drum, Russell Bell on guitar, John Webb does programming, a few keyboards, Martin Elliott on the bass, Andy Coghlan does bass on one track, Pat Carl's on the saxophone, Tessa Niles and Tracy Ackerman are doing the backing vocals along with Zane Griff. So the first track is called Berserker. I really like this. The guitar works good. It's still got that very 80s sound, but it really is a quirky track. This is The New Love. I love the start of this one. It's quite unique, and the guitar really gives it that extra depth. The Secret, a very quirky track. Got a nice beat to it. My Die Machine. Not keen on this one. It's just got that horrible 80s beat to it and the horrible vocal. Not one of the better tracks. Cold Warning comes next. It's okay. It's listenable. Pump It Up. Probably the worst Gary Numan song in the catalogue. Just nothing good about it. It's just a bit of a filler track there. The God Film. Yeah, it's okay. Got a nice beat to it. A Child with the Ghost. Pleasant enough track. I wouldn't say it's brilliant or classic. It's not bad. Sits there nicely on the album. That's one way to describe it. Then the last track, The Hunter. Best track on the album. Classic sounding Gary Numan. Although it's 80s drumming, that keyboard is very early thing. Another mixed bag. Got some good tracks. And there's some bad tracks. But this was the 80s. For you. And I'm going for this one an RTO ranking of 6.6. Okay then, top 10. Now this top 10, majority of the songs on these albums I do like, and these are the 10 most played Gary Numan albums for me. So coming in at number 10, we have got the 13th, released in 1997, and it's called Exile. There's only Gary Numan on vocals and keyboards and guitars, Mike Smith guitars, and Rob Harris on guitar. Dominion Day, very industrial sound again. It's great. There's lots of guitar on this. It's a really good track. Prophecy, very ambient. The drumming is good on here. It's a drum machine, but they've programmed it right. It's a great vocal from Gary. Very strong vocals as ever. Dead Heaven, solid. Nothing wrong with that one. Then we get Dark. A mixture of a new direction for Gary and classic Gary. Industrial meets synthetic. Really good. Innocence Bleeding. My favourite track on here. One of my favourites. It's just catchy. The Angel Wars. This is good as well. It's atmospheric and ambient. Absolution again, lots of atmosphere on this. Good layers of keyboard textures. An Alien Cure again, very solid track. Got lots of little sound bites as well. Exile. I like this because it's got a different drum beat from the others. For some reason, it sounds a lot. A solid album. The only criticism I've got, I think they've used the same drum program on every track, but it hasn't made it a bad album because the sounds that Gary's put round it and the runs on the keyboards and the guitar. So I shall give this an RTO ranking of 6.7. Number 9 then, got the 4th album from 1982, I, Assassin. Gary Numan's on here, of course. Roger Mason's on synths. Pino Palladino is on the fretless bass. Chris Slade, yes, Chris Slade. AC/DC, The Firm on the drums. John Webb, percussion. Mike, saxophone and harmonica. David Van Day, you remember him from Dollar? He does the hand caps. Teresa Bazar, the other half of Dollar, doing backing vocals. Nick Robson doing backing vocals. Michelle Adams backing vocals. Mick Kahn backing vocals. So the first track on here, White Boys and Heroes. This track is pretty good. It's got a funky bass line, and I actually like the backing vocals on this. War Songs. Now this reminds me of David Bowie's Ashes to Ashes, especially the rhythm. I like that track. Dream of Siam. Again, this is a bit Ultra Fox, especially the piano bit. but it's really good. Music for Chameleons, my favourite track on here. It's very atmospheric, lots of sound bites and good keyboards on this. Then we get This Is My House, then really high pitched Gary Newman synths on it, excellent track. Then we get the title track, which is a great track. It's a different style of arrangements, but it works on that one. The 1930s Rust, very different, very bluesy sort of synthy track, really interesting track. We Take Mystery to Bed, one of these crossover classic keyboards, a little bit of more of an upbeat drum machine, but it does work. Now Dance was more dancey. This sort of went back one to more classic with more the drum beats a little bit faster, but it all works, and it's a really good album. This is very underrated, and I'm going to give this one an RTO ranking of 6.8. Okay, coming in at number 8, we've got the 16th album from 2011, and it's called Dead Sun Rising. So joining Gary on here is Aid Fenton on keyboards and programming and piano, Tim Muddyman on guitar, Steve Harris guitar, Nathan Body on keyboards. First track on here is called Resurrection. This is my favourite track on here. It's very ambient. It's got that mystical East feel to it. Great track. Big noise transmission. Got some great guitar on here. The synths sound good on there as this. Dead Sun Rising, the title track. Not one of my favourites on here. The keyboards are a little bit high pitch and piercing on the ear. When the Sky Bleeds, He Will Comes on the next track. Don't mind this. There's some good strong guitar on this one. Like that. For the Rest of My Life, one of them songs that's got that industrial feel to it. Really strong track again. Not the Love We Dream Of, another of those ambient songs with some lovely piano on it. It's a really nice track. The Fall reminds me of a very sort of early Muse tracks. Yeah, bit different. We Are Lost. It's okay, bit of a feel and mediocre track. Then we get a reprise of For the Rest of My Life. It's alright. I like the track anyway. And I think they should have just put it all together as one. But that's still very good. Into the Battle. I love the drums, and it sounds like your bass speakers distorted and blown. Really adds to it. Then Not the Love We Dream Of, a piano version, and this is brilliant. Not the Love We Need is a great track, but this is just pure piano, and it's wonderful. This is a really good listen. This is where I think Gary really had turned the corner, and this is where the Gary Newman revival really started. It's a really good album. I'm going to give it an RTO ranking of 7 out of 10. Excuse me. Okay, then coming in at number 7, we're going to the 12th album from 1994, Sacrifice. Gary Newman says in the credits, all instruments, vocals, percussion and arrangements, with Kipper doing some additional guitar on Scar and synth bass on Love and Napalm, and TJ Davis backing vocals on Scar. So Gary practically did everything on here. First track on here is called Pray. It's got this sort of a robotic voice, industrial, weird but listenable. Deadliner, this is great. Reminds me of Our Friends Electric. It's got that real sort of feel to it. It's a great track. A Question of Faith. The drums on here, the drum program on here, they're so rich. They really sound like a drummer. Desire, again, one of Gary's atmospheric and ambient tracks, very strong. Scar, I don't like this. Of all the tracks on here, I just don't like it. I've never really liked that track. Then we got my favourite track, which is Love and Napalm. The guitar riff is brilliant, really adds to this track. You know, it sort of overtakes the drum beat, and the synth sound great. Really good track. Walk Into My Soul, one of the filler tracks on here, it's okay. Magic, that keyboard sound from the early days, that sort of whine with it, it's wonderful. It's that unique sound of Gary Numan. Bleed, a really strong track. Gary's vocal on that is absolutely brilliant. He's got a great voice. The Seed of Life, very similar to Bleed. It's sort of a continuation. Very, very good track. Okay, in my opinion, this is probably the best Gary Numan 90s album. There's so many good tracks on here. I really enjoy listening to this. And I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 7.2. Okay, then, coming in at number 6, we go to the 17th album now. Now, this is released on the 9th of October, my birthday in 2013, and it's called Splinter, with in brackets Songs from a Broken Mind. Joining Gary here is Nathan Body mixing, Matt Cotton did some mastering with him, Aid Fenton played some keyboards, Robin Fink plays guitar, Steve Malins, he's doing art direction, don't know why he's on there, Doc on keyboards, Steve Harris guitar, and Tim Mudian on guitars as well. First track on here is called I Am Dust. Gary's vocal is brilliant. Sings strong as he ever did. Very, very good track. Here in the Black. This reminds me of some of Rammstein's tracks. It's got that industrial sound, some great guitars and the synthesizers. Really strong track. Everything comes down to this. The riff on here in the guitar work is absolutely brilliant. Quite heavy guitar on that. Then we get the Call-In. Go one to one of his ambient tracks. I like this style of Gary Numan. It really is good. Splinter. Now, the drum program on this is absolutely brilliant. It really works, and it's the dominating part of this song, but the backing of the synths is superb on that. Lost, again, it's very industrial. I love this sound that Gary goes for now. He's singing as strong as ever. Probably a couple of octaves lower, but with this industrial feel that he's got, it works. Love, Hurt, Bleed. This is almost heavy metal done on synthesizers and electronics. Little bit of guitar in there. It's a heavy track. Like that. A Shadow Falls on Me. There's some reverb on this that's really interesting. Gives it so much atmosphere on them drums. One of Gary's weird vocal deliveries, but it works. Where I Can Never Be. So many good tracks on this album, and this is one of them. It's a lovely arrangement. We're the Unforgiven. I like how Gary uses guitars on this. Excellent track. Then Who We Are. Good vocal track from Gary. Strong tracks. Lovely atmospheric track. And My Last Day. Another magical track. The keyboard sound is really good. It's atmospheric, and you really get into this. This is a very good album. I think the last 3 or 4 albums from Gary Numan are probably the best material he's done for a very long time. They seem to get better and better. This is a terrific album. I listen to this a lot. And I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 7.5. Okay, then coming in at number 5, we have got the 18th album. And it was released in 2017, and it's called Savage, in brackets, Songs from a Broken World. So it's sort of continuation from the previous album. So joining Gary here is Aid Fenton keyboard, Steve Harris guitars, Tim Slade on the bass, Persia Newman on backing vocals, Nathan Boddy does some helps mixing, and the first track on here is Ghost Nation. Just like in his album from 2013, we've got this lovely industrial mixture of guitars and synths. Love the track. Bed of Thorns. I love the gentleness of this, and then the drum kicks in with the keyboards. Absolutely great. My Name is Ruin. Nothing wrong with this one. It's not the best track on the album, but it's still solid. The End of Things. I love Gary singing on this. He is a great singer. They've toned everything down to suit it because his voice has changed, but he can still sing it. Sings really well. And then we get At It, and It All Began With You. It's a bit too long. Chop a couple of minutes off it and you got the perfect song. When the World Comes Apart. This reminds me again of another band that's really on the resurgence again, Depeche Mode. It's got that sort of ambience and that sort of sound that Gary and Depeche Mode have now do, and it's a great track. Mercy, my favourite track on there. It's the combination of the keyboards and guitar working well that drives this song along. That's why it's my favourite. What God Intended is next. It's got one of them sort of rhythms that gets your feet tapping. Good track. Pray for the Pain You Serve. This is a track that really takes a little while to get going. About 2 minutes in, you go, oh, this is really dull, and all of a sudden, woo, it comes in. And it's worth waiting for it. It sort of keeps you on the edge of your seat and think, oh, please change. And when it does, you go, wow. The last track on here is Broken, more of that industrial synth song, which I really like. Again, a great album. As I said, the last few albums have just been terrific. I listen to this one a lot as well, and I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 7.7. Okay then, coming in at number 4, we have the 15th album, released in 2006, Jagged, and this is his first album for over 5 years. Joining Gary, we've got Richard Beasley on drums, Aid Fenton. There's loads of people on here. Too many to mention. We'll be here all day. But he's got some of his, like Aid and Steve Harris. So the first track on here is called Pressure. I like this. It's got one of them Eastern Mystique tracks on it, and I love it. Fold, good track. Industrial sound, and it's now what Gary has adapted, and it works. Halo, it's a modern track with classic overtones of Gary Newman. Super track. Slave, the drum programming isn't very good on here, but it's ambient keyboard that makes it a good listen. In a Dark Place, I love the percussion on it. It's got that metallic sound to it, and it really adds to the track. Haunted, this is quite heavy, and then it goes quiet and heavy. It's really good how it sort of swaps around. Then we get Blind. Again, I love how this starts. It's gentle and it builds up and layers. This is what I call a synthesizer prog track. It's got the elements of what a progressive rock track is, but it's all done on keyboards. It's really, really good. Before I Hate You, very solid, really haunting sort of metallic sound on this, and the haunty keyboard track really gives it some eeriness. Melt, it's again one of them great tracks of a mixture of modern synthesizers and traditional electric guitar, which sort of moves and twines around each other and gives you this really unique sound. And we get Scanner, gentle, and Gary's vocal is very moving on that. Then we get the title track, Jagged, industrial sound, that really, it's that sort of bassy sort of synth sound that drives this song. It's a great track to end the album on. I would say this is that first reinsurgence of Gary Numan, whether you got this sort of industrial metallic sound. It is up there with some of the great albums from the early 1980s, and from here on he just got better and better. So I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 7.8. Okay, we got to the top three. Now this was pretty tough, because these are, to me, are the creme de la creme. You've got some modern and some old in here. But coming in at number 3 is the most current album, and this was released in 2021, and it is called Intruder. So joining Gary on here is Aid Fenton, Steve Harris, Tim Slade. Raven and Persia Newman are on backing vocals. I'd say they are his children, because they don't give too much away of who's who. So the first track on here is called Betrayed. A really good start to this song. We've got guitars, we've got some really nice harmonies from the girls, Persia and Raven. I think they're girls. Don't assume, Ian. But it's a really good track. It's a good start to the album. We've got The Gift coming next. Again, daunting, atmospheric. The drum program is, even that's atmospheric. It's a really good track that draws you in. I Am Screaming. Again, one of these tracks that starts gentle and just builds. Nice layers come in. Intruder. It's got that very distinctive Gary keyboard sound and the distinctive vocal of Gary. Is This World Not Enough? Solid track. It's got all the elements of past Gary Numan being mixed with the new sound. Really good. Then my favourite song on this one is called A Black Sun. This is probably my favourite song of the new style of Gary Numan. It's so ambient and it's a great vocal. The Chosen, again, we got that mystique Eastern sound to it. Perfect ambience. The drum machine is perfect. Really adds to this track. Then we get And It Breaks Me Again. I do love this ambient keyboard sound that he produces. For another fine example of it on this track. Saints and Layers. It's probably the weakest track on the album. The drums don't sound so good on that. Now and Forever, it's just that industrial sound and keyboard, and the vocal is so strong on that. The last track on here is called The Ender Dragons. I love the keyboards on this again. The vocal is so strong. This album is brilliant. This is the best album of the 21st century from Gary. It's his best album since 1980. It's an absolute masterpiece from top to bottom. Even that track, that's the weaker track, there's something in that, everything on this album. So I'm going to give it an RTO ranking of 8 out of 10. So the top 2. So coming in at number 2, we've got the second album released in September 1980, and it's Telecon. So it's Gary Numan on here, Paul Gardner, Cedric Sharpley, Chris Payne, Russell Bell, Dennis Haynes, and John Webb. First track, This Wreckage. Definitely top 10 Gary Numan songs for me. Classic, daunting. That keyboard sound at the beginning brings back a lot of memories. Love that track. The Air Crash Bureau, brilliant track this is. It's that keyboard, it was so new, that sound. I love that track. Then we get the title track, Telecon. There's just something about this, that lovely crisp keyboard run in the middle with a bit of piano and Gary's unique voice. Remind Me to Smile, one of the great tracks off this album. One of the deep cuts. It's got a wonderful melody. I just love this track. Sleep by Windows, very sort of Ultravox hit sound. You know, Gary was the first to create this, and everyone sort of latched on and did an interpretation. It's a brilliant track. I Am Agent, my second favourite track on this. It's almost progressive rock, this one. The structure, the way it's structured, and the keyboards, terrific track. I Dream of Wires. What I like about this is actually the drum programming. Someone's really sat down and thought about the programming on this one. It just really lifts the track. Remember I Was Vapor. Now this one's got that sort of Human League drum beat to it. Nothing wrong with that. It's all the rage, the early Human League, you know, Being Boiled and all that. Great track, like that track a lot. Please Push Me No More. Some lovely piano on this, all the way through. Great track, great vocal from Gary. Then we get the Joy Circuit, which sort of continues on from Push Me No More. But this has got more keyboard in it. Great way to end the album. It's something that you would have got on them early, the two Tubeway Army, but you got to remember these are the same guys. Classic Gary Numan album. It's got some great tracks on here, some of his classics. Very important album, as Gary was a very important musician to the early 80s. So I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 8.2. So we've come down to the number one, and this has always been my favourite album. I don't think nothing will ever dislodge this. It's the debut album from 1979, and it's The Pleasure Principle. Basically it's Tubeway Army, but under a Gary Numan banner. So you've got Gary Numan doing the synthesizers and vocals, Paul Gardner on bass, Chris Payne on keyboards, Cedric Shapley on the drums, Billy Currie plays violin on a couple of tracks, Gary Robson's backing vocals. First track on here is called Airlane. This is the sound that I fell in love with on Tubeway Army. It's just that, I don't know, there's that high pitched sort of keyboard. Oh, it's just wonderful. And the Drake drum beat on that, I love that track. Metal. Now I reckon this is a track that didn't make it on the last Tubeway Army replica, because it's more Tubeway Army. If you listen to this and they go and put the Tubeway Army album on, they're very similar. So I reckon this is a leftover, but it's still a great track, and I'm glad they put it on this one. Then we get Complex. This has got a lot of violin sound. I think this has got a little bit of Billy Currie on it. It's really good, like that. Then we get Films. Wonderful keyboards, wonderful vocal, wonderful everything about this. It's just amazing for when this came out in '79. ME, another consistent rock track, experimenting, great sounds, great keyboard effects, super little track. Then we get Tracks. The piano on this is great, and you got a bass and a different sort of style of vocal from Gary, and it works. It's a great track. Observer. This is sort of a track that sounds like another track on this album, but it's got the same beat, but it's just got a different sort of keyboard run in it. Then we get Conversation. The quirky rhythm section is brilliant. It's quite a long track, but it works. And then we get the best ever song Gary Numan did as a solo artist. It's the Brilliant Cars. What can you say about this? It's just a classic song. Big hit for him. I love this song so much. Engineers. It's got that synthy bass line, and I love synthy bass lines if it's done right. Great way to end this brilliant album. Just like Replica, this is probably one of the most important electronic albums ever made. I love this album as much as Replica. As Gary was a very important person, ahead of his time. A lot of bands sort of got influenced by Tube Miami and the early Gary Numan albums, and this is why I love this album. And to me, Gary Numan is the original of the British New Wave sound. He was developing it long before some of other bands, and he only discovered synthesizers by accident, and he took it to the next level. So I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 8.5. Okay, pretty long one today. Next week's will be different because it's not going to be on a Wednesday, it's going to be on a Thursday, but that's because I'm going out on Thursday, and you'll find out why in the live stream. So tomorrow we've got a Battle of the Debuts, and it's a live album one, and tomorrow we're going to look at the song Remains the Same by Led Zeppelin, and it's up against Rainbow live on stage. And tomorrow we're going to take a trip down memory lane, which means we're going to look at the top 10 singles for the 18th of May in 1987. So join me for that tomorrow. Have a good day, whatever you're doing. So bye for now.